Local productions on QTV are made possible with support from viewers like you. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Junia Doan's A Spark. I'm Junia Doan, and thank you for joining us. My guest today, Camilla Rees, is the founder of Electromagnetic Health and the co-author of Public Health SOS, the shadow side of the wireless revolution. Welcome, Camilla. I'm really thrilled you're here.
Thank you so much. Great to be here.
And so the very first thing is I want some explanation about what is an electromagnetic field or fields.
So electromagnetic fields can be grouped into two categories. One are the natural electromagnetic fields in nature. All matter emits frequencies. And then there are the man-made electromagnetic fields. And that is what we're using for electricity, magnetic fields and batteries, and the wireless, all the wireless technologies, cell phones, wireless, all these, think of it as energy and different types of frequencies, different modulations, but it's all invisible, so we don't really think that it's there, but it's there, and it's a force of energy that is biologically disruptive to our perfectly balanced bodies that operate with in homeostasis. So when you're pushing the regulation systems of the body with an artificial, man-made energy force, you're creating chaos, and things are not as stable, and it leads to disease and to all kinds of imbalances.
And you've had personal experience.
Yes, the reason that I learned about this, I was formerly in the financial industry, and I had the bad luck of being in an apartment in San Francisco and had new neighbors move in, and they put a wireless router right on the other side of the wall from my pillow. And so after a couple months of this, my brain was scrambled, I was fatigued, all kinds of problems.
How did you figure out that was the issue?
Well, by that point, I'd also studied a lot of health and medicine and knew what it was not, and I knew it wasn't me because I'd feel much better when I'd leave. And I kept sort of observing this, better when I leave, worse when I'm there. And I just knew that electromagnetic fields had been, from radio towers in Seattle, had been a problem for a patient of a doctor I know who I heard this case study at a conference once. We lived opposite a radio tower in Seattle, and the poor kid, 18 years old, was having what they were saying was a chronic neurodegenerative condition. They were predicting he'd be in a wheelchair the rest of his life, and this doctor figured out it was because the radio tower was impacting him. So at the time, I thought, well, that's the strangest thing. Nothing like that will ever happen to me. But when I started getting these symptoms and I couldn't get to the bottom of it, I knew it wasn't mold, it wasn't chemicals, it wasn't me. I remembered that. And then I got online, found scientists expert in this, and got to the bottom of it.
So you've made it a life mission now to educate people.
For over a decade, I have been reading the science, meeting the scientists, putting on programs around the country, and speaking, testifying, all kinds of things. Yeah, I thought I was just going to do it for a year because I thought that would be all it would take. Once people understood the incredible, extensive body of science that exists going back to the 1940s, this is not news that electromagnetic fields are biologically disruptive or can lead to cancer or neurological conditions. That research, at least in this country, I know goes back at least 75 years. So unfortunately, a multi-trillion-dollar industry was allowed to emerge even though that information was known to our government.
Can these electromagnetic fields ever be positive for a human?
Well, yes, if you think about it, it's an energy force. So if the body needs some energy, there are people that are making things like these mats today that that you lie on that have magnetic fields or infrared or whatever. They're helping the body do what it should be doing okay on its own. And I know some people who have gotten very good results from, and then in therapeutic settings and, wound healing and bone healing, they've been using electromagnetic fields in conventional medicine. But, it's when this technology originated, it was in military settings, radar. It was in very limited use, not population-wide. Now we have all these exposures that are additive exposures, with cumulative effects. Every day there's some kind of new wireless gadget, wearable wireless now they're talking about implantable wireless chips. And so it's insane, really, when you look at the science of what we're doing. We are, as one of the top researchers in this field, Dr. Martin Paul of Washington State University says, if you think about it, we are doing what is knowingly damaging the four things that as humans we value the most: our health, our brain function, the integrity of our genome, and our reproductive capacity.
And he thinks all of those are affected.
Yes. Absolutely, all of those, and those are the worst things. But there are many other things, like the quality of our life is also being impaired by this kind of radiation. And many people know that they might get a headache from a cell phone,
yes.
Or they might feel a little dizzy around a Wi-Fi router. Some people are very sensitive, but it's affecting every single system in our body. It's now been linked with about 10 cancers. We're almost finished with a paper on that subject. And even in major U.S. government research that came out last year was linked with 3 different kinds of cancer.
Do you think all people are affected by this, whether or not they know it?
It's a great question. And the answer is very interesting. We all are being affected. You can see it in the effect on the blood. You can see it, there are many different ways that we know that the biology is being affected. And sometimes people say that the people who are more sensitive to it are the lucky ones. Because, we know to get away. We have that little warning system. In contrast to a chemical or a mold that you could smell, we don't have any early warning system when it comes to electromagnetic fields. But some people are a little more sensitive. And why are they more sensitive? Well, part of it just may be, genetic, but some of it is because if you have a lot of heavy metals in your body, you might be more sensitive. If you have any prostheses, artificial metal limb or dental materials, dental amalgams that are metal, that's like putting the hot spot right in your head, because the electromagnetic fields reflect off anything metal. Same in your home. You may not realize you have metal furniture. You're going to have all these electromagnetic fields bouncing around. So children with braces, with metal braces, it's so sad. Some of them I know have had like seizures in schools with very high-powered Wi-Fi routers in the schools, seizures. But when on the weekends, the mother noticed, well, they were fine. Or on vacation, they were fine. They go back into the school. They were having all these problems. Finally figured out it was the Wi-Fi. They got plastic braces instead, and the child is fine.
Interesting. So all metals in the mouth, I knew there was something to do with silver, but whatever they replaced it with is still a metal.
No.
Maybe, I don't know.
Well, the mercury, they're mostly mercury, the silver, they call silver fillings, but they're made of mercury. And when you use a cell phone, by the way, against your head, it makes the mercury from those fillings actually release. And so that's not good. But any metal, whether it's gold or a mercury amalgam, which is a mix of metals, they are going to be a problem. Whereas the what do they call them? They make plastic fillings. I can't remember what they call them, but they won't have. You don't have a problem with that. You might have a problem with being sensitive to some of the chemicals in those, but you don't have a problem in terms of reflections.
Now you have serious concerns about the 5G they're going to be installing all over to make our cell phones be able to process data faster. Expand a little bit on that. What is the issue there?
It's complex, and in addition to all of the proliferation of these technologies in our lives, and the big cell towers that you see, now they're moving toward putting not just cell towers, but also putting antennas on municipal infrastructure like utility poles, street signs, street lamps, buildings. And they're smaller, just as powerful, and they're coming very close to homes, like every 1 to 2 to 3 utility poles. It's already starting. Up in Rhode Island, where I grew up in the summers, every couple utility poles, they're going up. And there are 23 states that have enacted legislation that enable this. So it's not just 5G antennas, it's actually 4G and 5G. And we're not really ready for the 5G. There's a lot of hype around it. But there's, think of 5G in 2 categories. One is sort of in the frequency range that we're using now for 4G.
Yes.
And then we go into sort of military band frequencies and police frequencies. And then above 20 gigahertz is where they're going with this, which are going to be millimeter waves, much higher pulsation used in weapons. And those are going to be much more biologically disruptive and all kinds of different modulation characteristics that are going to make the exposures directional to you, to your cell phone, direct targeted to you, as opposed to now it's all around us when we want to use something. We're tapping into sort of something generally. The 5G, when they finalize it and pick the frequencies and standardize it, and we're actually a long way off from that, it's going to be directed at you, ultra-high pulsation. When you're in a room with a lot of people with these devices that are using this, it's going to be very intense, seriously dangerous, and it also requires 4G to work.
I didn't know that.
It requires...
Say how.
Yeah, the 4G is required for the 5G to know where your device is, for identification of your location.
Yeah.
And so they're not really, mostly the 5G is going to be for information transfer, not telephones. You'll still be using the 4G on the phone as well, along with the 5G for phones, for phone service. So why is this happening? Why are we putting antennas so close to people? It's about at the second floor level. Big towers, they're way up, high, they're spread out over an entire neighborhood or region. And now they're putting them on the utility poles right at the second floor level, beaming in to your child's bedroom. Why are they doing this? So there are many answers. And one is, just the commercial motivation. They want to sell more phones, more devices, more chips, but I just really, it's hard to believe that that's the only reason. There's thought that it also has to do with the wireless companies wanting to be able to avoid the delays and fees that they would otherwise have to pay in order to put more towers up.
I wasn't aware of that.
Yes, circumventing that, but that they get the states to pass these enabling bills that basically force the local governments to allow the Verizons of the world to put antennas on their municipal infrastructure, forcing them to do this. Your local government has no more control over the integrity of your environment that you live in. And now there are over 100 cities right now fighting some federal legislation that was enabling this kind of antenna infrastructure and taking away the local rights. So that's one reason, avoiding paying these big fees and time delays applications for big towers. Then there's the other reason of wanting the wireless companies wanting to be able to really compete with the with the television companies. So they're going to need, in order to have all this transmission, they're going to need more transmission, towers close to homes in order to do that. So that's another reason. Then the real vision for all of this is quite insane. We've all heard of this coming Internet of Things, where they're putting antennas into your dishwasher, into your refrigerator, into anything electronic in your house. In fact, they're embedded now in appliances. If you go buy them today, you may not know it that your television actually has a hidden antenna in it, but they do. And the end game is they're wanting to collect data.
Who is they?
The wireless industry. The money making has shifted from just simply selling the devices and selling the plans to selling the granular information about you. The marketing jackals, are wanting to collect data, so they'll be collecting all kinds of things about studying you and your usage of all these different things and time of day. They'll be profiling you even more than they do today. And then there's the external, the wearable wireless, and the antennas they're putting, like in a town. For example, in London, there are these kiosks that when you walk by it, it's connected to your phone. You don't know it, and you're on your way 2 blocks from Harrods, and and all of a sudden you get pinged that there's a special sale at Harrods on whatever, and they know you're going to love, So there's incredible profiling going on, and people pay for this data. So we've moved into what one of the Harvard Business School professor, Shoshana Zuboff, who wrote this book called Surveillance Capitalism. Really excellent book, and it's about how capitalism has gone rogue. We're just, we're not, people are not making things and providing services to improve our lives, to improve our well-being. They're just doing this to make a buck on data. That's, it's not a very virtuous thing.
So have you had some good luck with states trying to reverse this, forbidding cities to say no? What you've been an activist in this area.
Well, right now there are many different efforts and some legal efforts in different parts of the country, both at the federal level where there's been legislation passed, and one of the senators from Connecticut, Richard Blumenthal, has questioned the FCC and actually had a hearing. Senate Commerce Committee had a hearing, grilled a number of these people, and he said, where are the safety studies? One of the FCC commissioners, when he was out in the field and out in the Midwest somewhere a year and a half ago, said, oh, no. Some mayor asked him, what do I tell my constituents? Are these antennas safe? And he said, oh, no, we've looked at that. And so Senator Blumenthal said sent him a letter and said, we want to know what the evidence is. What did you evaluate? Please send me the studies in 2 weeks. And so they got a letter back. There was no evidence.
Oh.
There's absolutely, and then they had these hearings. There is no evidence for safety, nor are there studies ongoing by the industry to even look at this. No, nothing. So he said, so we're flying blind here. So anyway, he's been a hero, but then things have quieted down there. We have working with some lawyers that are in California, developing a legal strategy for this field. Just the other day, there's a document that's come out that it's like a guidebook for local activists in different states to teach them how to go about repealing the laws in these about 23 states now have passed legislation, even in Connecticut, even in Blumenthal's own state, where he used to be Attorney General. They passed legislation enabling this year. So it's a big fight. There's a lot at stake. And it's kind of exciting as an activist because there's so many people coming together around this now. The cities and states looking at it as a constitutional issue. They're not even focused on the health issue because it's a power grab here going on. And then there are all kinds of environmentalists that are starting to realize that this is their issue too, that it also not only is affecting humans, but it's affecting the ecosystem, it's affecting the birds and the bees and the food sources for animals, and so it's growing. The momentum is growing, but I'm concerned because we only have a short amount of time before they start putting in those much higher frequencies, and it might be a couple of years. They're piloting some now, but including in New York, but. There's new, really exciting research that is coming out of Europe. It's not published yet, but I'm aware of it, that is showing that a new way in which the electromagnetic fields are impacting our biology. We already know it's impacting the DNA. We know it's affecting the blood-brain barrier, creating permeability in the blood-brain barrier and other junction barriers in the body, like the gut lining. And we already know it's having neurological effects. It's affecting the calcium in the cells. They're all oxidative stress. There are all these known mechanisms of why this is creating the chaos in our bodies. But there's new information related to the water in our bodies. And the water, actually, 99% of the molecules in our body are water. Only 1% is what we think of as us. And 99% is water. So when you go to the doctor, they're focused on the 1% instead of on the system of the water. And water is changeable. And we all know it changes from water to ice to snow, et cetera. But it also changes at the molecular level. When these electromagnetic fields are impacting the water, it creates unbelievable chaos. And in that state, it can't do what it normally does, which is the molecules operate not only individually communicating with each other, building energy, creating energy, but they operate in unison like a school of fish or a flock of geese. They operate in a morphic field, and when they're in that state, they're able to connect to the quantum field. And that is where we get our intuition, our instincts, our creativity, our gut feelings. It's not just in this brain that's in our head. We are actually, all of life, plants, animals, and humans, are always in a relationship with that bigger field. Scientists now know and understand. So what they've been able to show is that there's great impairment in our ability to connect to that field from electromagnetic fields, worse from the 5G frequencies than the 4G frequencies, but equally, really bad as well from the other generations of the 4G and the 3G as well.
So you would recommend, based on what you know now, what? What can you and I do in our personal life to protect ourselves, take down the effects, which we don't even know which is doing what and how? I know you've walked around with a Geiger counter in this apartment.
Geiger counter's a little different. A meter, not a Geiger.
Meter,
okay.
Excuse me. Yes.
Geiger counters for like nuclear radiation. So we have, the first step is to become aware of what's in your environment. And just in terms of your home, wherever you work on your computer, hardwire it with an Ethernet cord. Unless you need to be mobile with something, hardwire at every opportunity. It's faster. It's much faster. It's much more secure. So, and you avoid those exposures. If you use a cell phone, either use it on a speakerphone. Never put it against your head, based on what I've seen in the science, and use a headset, a wired headset, not one of those Bluetooth things that have the radiation coming off the thing on your ear. So you want to make sure that you don't have any kind of electronic equipment that is on the wireless, not in your bedroom, in particular, because it depletes melatonin and it interferes with sleep. So many people who have sleep problems today, which is 70 million Americans, I have worked with several people that have, it's almost predictable that if they have a sleep problem, you get them to turn off the wireless in the home, to take the cell phone out of the bedroom, turn it off, turn everything off, and they sometimes sleep like a baby for the first time in 7 years. It's quite dramatic.
Is there a consultancy you can go to if you're concerned about what you're exposed to in your home or apartment?
Yeah, it's a very fragmented, small field at this point, but there's an organization called the Building Biology Institute that I'm actually on the advisory board for, and they train people in this, in how to assess an environment. So you can do the obvious with what you know with your devices, but you also really can't know everything that's going on in a room, because there are all these reflections that I mentioned, and there may be stuff coming in from the next door neighbor or up on the next, in an apartment building upstairs on the roof, if you're on a high floor. So you need a meter, and a meter it just is really measuring the heating, the thermal effects. So it's a gauge of what you're exposed to. It's measuring the power density. It's not telling anything about the frequencies, which would tell a more complete story, and is very important to know about as well, but it's an initial gauge and of what might be going on there, and then you can use it to, as you lower things, as you unplug things and connect things with Ethernet cord, you can check to see. I got mine down, and not only did I have the situation in California in that apartment, but then I had two similar situations in an office building, and one neighbor finally agreed to hardwire his computer. The other didn't want to, and I ended up having to shield the wall and reflected her router right back at her. And I warned her. I said, I want you to know, I'm going to Home Depot. I'm going to be putting up sheet metal, and I'm going to reflect it back to you, and it's going to make it worse for you. So within 24 hours, she actually hardwired. So that was great. Then now where I am, I had a guy move in next door, but I didn't know him because he was a different elevator bank. And I'm feeling dizzy again. What's going on? I look at the meter, extremely high levels. He had 2 routers. So I ended up having to shield the wall. And there are different ways you can do that with paints, shielding paints. You can do it with shielding fabrics. You can do it with industrial quality aluminum, staple gunned, and then you put something over it. There are films that are quite, you don't even notice them, that you can put on the windows that will block windows. A lot of it comes through the glass more easily than the building material, and certain building materials are better than others. Like bricks are going to be more protective than just like wood. Adobe is really one of the best. The real Adobe really blocks a lot of it. Building Biology Institute has a referral list on their website. People can find local experts to come and measure and assess and help them remediate.
Thank you so much. So here's what we've learned. It's not good, but it's a lot. And that is, your whole life can be redirected by illness. But you, instead of being victim, you can turn it into a cause to help others. She's gone extensively, because of her personal experience with these waves, to warn others and try and protect them, especially with new technology coming out. This is something that you can do in your life. See a problem, solve it for yourself and others. So go out, be kind to someone, do it again tomorrow, someone you know and someone you don't know, and I'll see you next time. Thank you so much for tuning in. That was wonderful.
To contact Junia, send her an email at juniadonsthespark@gmail.com. For more information, program schedules, and news about future guests, go to www.juniadonthespark.com. Thank you for joining us. See you next time on Junia Doan's The Spark.
Local productions on QTV are made possible with support from viewers like you. Thank you.